welcome to another deep dive. You ready to get into it?
Definitely. Always excited to see what we're exploring today.
Well, this one, I think you're really going to like. We're looking at this guide. It's called, hold on, let me make sure I get this right. Comprehensive Guide to Daily Routine and Hobbies for Advanced English Learners.
Oh, interesting. That sounds right up our alley.
Right. Even if you're already pretty good with English, you can always pick up some new tips, right? Like how to describe your day, your hobbies, stuff we all do, but don't always think that much about how we talk about it.
You're so right. I mean, sometimes even as a native speaker, I find myself kind of fumbling for the right words when describing my daily routine.
Totally. So this guide, it starts with morning routines, which, I mean, who doesn't love a good morning routine?
Right.
So they suggest like using more advanced vocabulary instead of just saying, wake up, it's rise and shine, or, if you're like me, maybe hitting the snooze button a few times.
Haha. I think we've all been there. But I see their point. Choosing more specific, vivid language can really make your English, well, just more interesting to listen to.
Yeah, it's like painting a picture with your words.
Oh,
right?
exactly.
Okay, so then the guide, it moves on to daytime activities. And I noticed they really emphasize using more advanced grammar to describe your routines, like not just simple sentences.
Yeah, they give a good example of that. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Okay, so instead of saying like, I finished work, I went to the gym, I ate dinner, which, let's be real, kind of sounds boring, they suggest something like, after wrapping up my workday, I headed to the gym for a quick workout before grabbing a bite to eat.
See, that flows so much better, right?
Way better, and it sounds more, I don't know, sophisticated, like you really have a good grasp of the language.
Totally. Do you think most like advanced English learners, do you think they struggle with using these more complex sentences in conversation?
It's a good question. I think sometimes, yeah, the focus is so much on individual words and grammar rules that they forget about how those words fit together in a sentence, in a paragraph. The bigger picture.
It's like music,
Right.
right? You need the individual notes, but it's how you arrange them, the rhythm that makes it a song.
Perfect analogy.
Okay, so moving on to evenings. I love how this guide gives all these interesting vocabulary suggestions for hobbies and evening activities too. Like instead of I like to do, it's I pursue a passion for, or I'm honing my skills in.
Ooh, I like that. It sounds so much more, I don't know, intentional.
Right, like you're really dedicated to what you're doing.
Exactly. And that fits right in with the idea of being an advanced learner, right? It's not just knowing the words, it's using them in a way that shows, like, depth.
Absolutely. And there was this one phrase that really stood out to me. It said something about immersing oneself in a hobby.
Immersing oneself. That's interesting. To me, that suggests it's not just a casual thing. It's like this hobby's become a core part of who you are.
I see what you mean. Like it's not just filling time, it's like enriching your life,
Exactly. And those kinds of hobbies, they can give you a sense of belonging, maybe even purpose, like you found your tribe.
And being able to express that in another language, that's got to be really rewarding.
For sure. It's like you're unlocking a whole new level of communication.
So true. And speaking, connecting with others, I found it interesting how this guide doesn't just focus on like individual hobbies, but also talks about the cultural and social side of things.
Yeah. They mention cross-cultural hobbies, which I think is fascinating.
What would some examples of that be?
Well, it could be anything, really, like learning a traditional dance from another country or maybe exploring global cuisines. It's about, like, broadening your horizons through your interests.
I love that. It's like using your hobbies as a way to connect with people from all over.
Exactly. And it can help you develop a deeper appreciation for different cultures.
Oh, and there was this quote from the guide that really resonated with me. It said, let me find it. Okay, while I find woodworking relaxing, it can also be incredibly meticulous.
I like that.
Right. It perfectly captures how a hobby can be both enjoyable and challenging at the same time.
It's so true. And it's interesting how they use the word meticulous. It really highlights the precision involved, even though it's supposed to be relaxing.
Totally. And, speaking of how the guide talks about language, they also emphasize advanced grammar for talking about hobbies, just like they did for routine.
They do, and they have a great example using a conditional sentence. Let me see. Here it is. If I had more time, I would love to take up pottery. It's simple, but effective,
It is. I mean, it's relatable, too. We all have those hobbies we wish we had more time for.
Right.
And using that conditional structure, it just adds, like, a layer of depth to how you express that.
Definitely. It shows a good understanding of English tenses and how to use them to talk about hypothetical situations.
So we've covered a lot. advanced vocab for routines and hobbies, using complex grammar, even how hobbies connect us to different cultures.
Yeah, we've barely scratched the surface of this guide.
It's packed with good stuff. But I think we've given our listeners a great starting point for how to talk about their own routines and hobbies in a more advanced way.
I agree. It's about using language to, like, really bring your experiences to life.
Absolutely. Now, before we move on, I want to leave you with a little something to think about. We've talked a lot about how we describe our hobbies, right?
Right.
But how does understanding someone else's hobby, even one you don't personally share, how does that help you connect with them on a deeper level? Something to ponder.
That's a great question. I'm gonna have to think about that one. Yeah, that's a good one to think about. I mean, it makes me think about like how shared interests, even if they seem kind of random, can be a really strong foundation for actually building relationships.
Yeah, it's so true. Sometimes it's the most unexpected conversations that lead to like really meaningful connections. Like I remember once I was at this coffee shop and I saw this guy wearing a band t-shirt and I was like, "Oh, I love that band." And we ended up talking for like an hour about music and travel and all this other stuff we had in common. It was so cool.
That's awesome. And what's interesting is that in that situation, the t-shirt, it was like a shortcut to a deeper conversation. You skipped all the small talk and went straight to something you were both passionate about.
Totally. It was like having this like secret code that unlocked a whole new level of conversation. And I think when you're learning a new language, finding those shared interests, it's even more valuable.
Oh, for sure. Like when you're still trying to get the hang of grammar and vocabulary, having a shared hobby, it just makes communicating so much easier. It's like less pressure, more fun.
Yeah. You don't have to think so much about like conjugating verbs correctly when you're both geeking out about something you love.
Exactly. And the best part is, as your language skills improve, those conversations about your hobbies, they can become even more interesting and complex.
Totally. I've experienced that firsthand. Like when I first started learning Spanish, I joined this hiking group, right? And even though my Spanish was pretty basic at the time, I could still communicate with the other hikers because we had this shared love of, being outdoors and exploring nature. And over time, my Spanish, it just like naturally improved through those conversations.
That's awesome. It's like learning by doing. You're so focused on the experience, the connection, that the language learning just happens organically.
Yeah, totally. And I think this guide, it kind of touches on that, this idea that hobbies can be more than just like solo activities. They can be like gateways to social interaction and even like cultural exploration.
Absolutely. They talk about cross-cultural hobbies, which I think is a great example of that. Like someone might get into calligraphy, right? And that could lead them to explore like Japanese or Chinese calligraphy. And then boom, they're learning about a whole new culture and maybe even a new language.
Whoa, I never thought about it like that, but that makes so much sense. It's like a domino effect of like curiosity and learning.
Exactly. And it doesn't even have to involve travel. You can find local communities or online groups that share your interests no matter how niche they are.
It's amazing how something as simple as a hobby can open up so many doors, right?
Totally. And those connections, they can like seriously enrich your life in so many ways. You learn new perspectives, challenge your own assumptions, and maybe even discover hidden talents or passions you never knew you had.
I love that. So as we dive deeper into this guide, I think it's important to remember that language, it's not just about rules and vocabulary. It's about like using your words to connect with people,
Hmm.
you know, to share your unique perspective with the world.
So well said. It's about bridging those gaps between cultures and, like, ultimately understanding each other better.
Beautifully put. Okay, before we move on to the last section of this guide, I want to pause for a second, ask our listeners something. Think about a hobby you're really passionate about, like truly love doing. How has that hobby shaped who you are, your relationships, even your worldview? Just take a moment to reflect on that before we continue our exploration. So I hope you had a chance to really think about that question because it really gets to the core of why we love the things we love. It's not just about filling time, it's about expressing yourself, connecting with something bigger.
It's true. It's like each hobby, it's kind of like a thread in the bigger story of our lives.
Yeah.
Adds a little color, a little texture.
Ooh, I like that. A thread in the tapestry. And this guide, it keeps coming back to how important it is to not just do the hobby, but to be able to like talk about it in a way that other people get it.
Right. Because honestly, how many times have you tried to explain something you love and the other person just looking at you like, huh? Like, how do you describe that feeling of I don't know, finishing a really complex knitting project to someone who's never held knitting needles.
That's a good point, is like trying to describe a sunset to someone who's blind.
Exactly. And that's where having those advanced English skills comes in, right? Knowing the right words, the grammar. It helps you paint a better picture.
Yeah. And maybe even inspire someone else to try it too.
Totally. It's like you're saying, hey, come check out this awesome thing I've discovered.
So this guide, it's like a toolbox. It's giving you those tools to communicate your passion clearly and with confidence.
And with like a little bit of flair.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just I do this. It's this is why I love it and this is how it makes me feel.
That's what makes it interesting to listen to. And that's a big part of being an advanced English learner, right? It's not just about being correct. It's about being engaging.
100%.
So, like, bigger picture here. We're not just talking about English, are we? We're talking about, like, self-discovery, figuring out who you are and what matters to you.
And then sharing that with the world. Like
Yeah.
using language as a bridge to connect with people, create understanding.
So well said. Okay, we've got to wrap up this deep dive. But before we do, I want to leave you with one last thought, okay?
Yeah.
This guide, it gave us vocabulary, grammar, all kinds of stuff. But the most important thing, I think,
What's that?
remember that language. It's powerful. It lets you share your story, your passions. It lets you make the world a more interesting place.
Couldn't agree more.
Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep using your voice, you know? Make the world a little brighter.
Awesome.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We hope you learned a thing or two, got inspired, and had some fun along the way.
See you next time. Keep practicing.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive into something that seems, well, kind of ordinary at first. Daily routines, hobbies, you know, the stuff we do every day and the things we love to do in our spare time.
Yeah, sounds pretty basic, right?
It does. But trust me, it gets way more interesting. We've got these two sources here. One's like a guide to just describing your daily routine, and the other's all about hobbies and interests, you know, listing a bunch of them out.
I bet there are tons.
Oh, there are. But here's the thing. We're not just going to learn how to talk about these things in English. We're going to go deeper. Like, why do we do what we do? What does it actually say about us?
Oh, okay. I see where we're going with this.
Exactly. So both of these sources, right off the bat, they talk about how routines are super important for learning English.
Yeah, makes sense. Practice makes perfect, right?
Totally. But it's not just about language. I mean, think about it.
It's like our lives run on routines, don't they?
Exactly. Routines are kind of like the invisible structure of our whole lives.
Invisible architecture. I like that.
Right. Like, we might not always think about them consciously, but
Yeah.
I mean, think about your day. How many routines do you actually
A
have
lot. I mean, more than I realize, I think.
from the minute you wake up?
Right. Yeah.
Like in this daily routine source, they talk about, okay, first you wake up, then you maybe have breakfast, commute to work or to school.
Right. Those little steps.
Yeah, those little steps, all of those things, they all add up.
And they make our day predictable. I mean, I need that.
Me too.
Uh-huh.
Like, knowing what's coming next can actually reduce stress.
Oh, totally. Because your brain's not like, wait, what's happening? What do I do?
Right. It's like it frees up mental energy for other things like, oh, I don't know, maybe actually enjoying a hobby.
Uh-huh. Nice segue.
I had to. Because, so this other source, it's got this huge list of hobbies, like from super active stuff to like chill, relaxing things.
There really is something for everyone, huh?
Oh, yeah. Like
Yeah.
painting, playing sports,
Mhm.
gardening, writing, playing video games, learning a language.
I mean, that in itself is a hobby.
Totally.
Hmm.
And what I think is so cool is, like, it's not just about having fun, right? Hobbies are like a way to express who you are.
Yeah, they're kind of personal.
Yeah. Like, if you love to bake, maybe you're a really creative person or really precise.
Right. Or maybe you love to rock climb and you love that sense of adventure.
Totally. And the thing is, they can be super good for you, too. Like stress relief. I know for me, when I get home and I play a little guitar,
Let me play.
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
It totally melts the stress away.
There's actually there's research on that. Engaging in creative stuff, even for a short time, can like really lower your stress hormones.
Wow, I didn't know that.
It's true.
So, okay, we've got routines on one hand, keeping us grounded.
The scaffolding.
Yeah, and then hobbies on the other hand, letting us be ourselves.
And express ourselves, yeah.
But how do these two actually work together? Like, don't they sometimes clash?
Well, think of it this way. Routines give you a framework, a canvas almost. And your hobbies are like what you used to paint that canvas. Make it your own.
Oh, I like that.
Right. But yeah, there can definitely be tension. Too much routine, no time for anything fun.
True.
But no routine, you might not have time for your hobbies either.
Oh, absolutely. I've been there. Like, so busy that I can't even pick up my guitar.
Right. The key is finding a balance. What works for you? Some people, they need that super structured schedule.
Like, they thrive on it.
Totally. But others, they need more flexibility.
Yeah. So I guess the question for our listener is, where do you fit in all of this?
Exactly. Take a look at your life. How are your routines working for you? Are you making time for the things you love? Maybe there's room for a little more structure.
Like maybe set aside a specific time each day for that new hobby you've been wanting to try.
Exactly. Or maybe it's time to loosen up a little. Not everything has to be scheduled down to the minute.
Totally. And here's a thought to leave you with. We've been talking about all of this in the context of language learning, right?
Yeah, because that's our focus.
But what about other skills? Anything you want to learn, anything you want to get better at, it takes practice.
True.
And maybe a bit of routine can help make that practice a little easier.
Consistency is key, right?
Exactly. So whether it's playing an instrument, learning to code, or even just starting a daily meditation habit, it's all about finding that sweet spot, you know?
Where structure meets passion?
Exactly. And who knows, maybe your next deep dive will be into something totally unexpected.
That's the fun part. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
We'll see you next time.
All right, let's dive into something we all know. Daily routines and hobbies. We're taking a look at this guide about talking about them in English, going past, just the basic words.
Yeah, going a little deeper, right? Looking at how you can use the vocabulary and grammar to really express yourself well, naturally.
Yeah.
Especially in like those everyday conversations.
Exactly. Like imagine you're chatting with someone new and they ask, what's your typical day like? We all know those basic words. Wake up, eat, work. But how do we sound, well, more like ourselves?
That's a good point. I mean, the way you even use those simple verbs can say a lot about you, like wake up. Do you drag yourself out of bed, bounce out of bed, or maybe
Ooh.
reluctantly peel yourself away from your dreams?
Reluctantly peel myself away from my dreams. Some mornings, that's totally me. But wouldn't using, fancier verbs like that get the grammar all messed up?
Not really. The present simple tense is like your best friend here. But instead of just I wake up at 7, you could say, I usually try to drag myself out of bed by 7, but sometimes my dreams have other plans. See? Still grammatically correct, but a little more personality, right?
Totally. So it's about finding that balance between good grammar and, well, being expressive. Speaking of clear, the guide also mentions sequence words, like first, then, after that. Are those really important, or can they sound a bit robotic?
That's a good question. Yeah, sequence words are definitely important, like signposts to guide the listener, right? But too many can sound a bit mechanical. It's about finding that balance. You can use them for like key moments or even play with their placement a bit.
So instead of first I brush my teeth, then I get dressed, you could say I stumble to the bathroom, barely awake, and somehow manage to brush my teeth. Only then do I attempt to get dressed.
Exactly. It's like you're telling a little story within your routine. And that actually brings us to another thing that can add depth. Adverbs of frequency.
Oh, right. Those little words like always, sometimes, never. I get how they're useful, but I feel like I always use the same ones, like usually and often.
It's easy to get stuck in a rut. But think of them like spices. You wouldn't use just salt and pepper in every dish.
Yeah.
Right? Each adverb adds its own flavor.
Okay, so how could I, spice things up a bit? Give me an example.
Instead of, I usually drink coffee in the morning, you could try, I religiously brew a pot of coffee every morning. Or maybe, I occasionally treat myself to a fancy latte on my way to work. You see, different vibes.
Wow, you're right. Religiously brew a pot of coffee definitely sounds more intense.
Exactly. And the cool thing is once you start noticing these nuances, you'll see them everywhere. How native speakers use them to, show personality, be funny, even make a point.
That's so interesting. So it's not just the words themselves, it's how you use them.
Exactly. That's where the fun is.
This makes me think about hobbies now. I feel like talking about mine in English can be a little clunky. I know the basic words, but putting them together naturally is tricky.
You're not alone there. Even native speakers, sometimes it feels like you're just listing things off a resume. Right?
Yeah, so how do we make it less resume and more conversation?
It's about going deeper than just what you do and getting to the why. Why do you enjoy it? What gets you excited about it?
So instead of just, I like to paint, I should talk about, how mixing colors makes me feel or how satisfying it is to make something beautiful.
Exactly. Share a little story, something funny, or maybe even a challenge you had. It makes it come alive, more engaging.
Okay, so we're adding flavor to those basic verbs, using sequence words strategically, spicing things up with adverbs, and adding some personal touch to our hobbies. It's like building a toolkit for expressing ourselves.
I like that. A toolkit. And the more tools you have, the more confident you'll be, right?
So we've covered morning routines and even touched on hobbies, but how do we, bring those two together naturally?
That's where it gets really interesting. It's not about keeping them separate. It's about seeing how they connect, how they influence each other.
This is getting interesting. I'm ready for more.
Let's get into it right after a quick word from our sponsors.
All right, we're back, ready to figure out this routine and hobby connection. I gotta admit, I'm a little stuck on how to blend them without it sounding forced, do I just list my hobbies after I describe my workday?
Not exactly. It's more like imagine weaving a tapestry. Your routine is like that background thread, the structure.
Yeah.
But your hobbies, those are the colorful threads. They add the depth, the personality.
Okay, I like that. But how do I actually do that in a conversation? Examples, please.
Sure. Let's say your hobby is photography and you're talking about your evening. So instead of after work, I eat dinner and then go take pictures, you could say something like, as the sun starts to set, I usually grab my camera and head out, to catch that golden light. It's the perfect way to unwind after the office.
Oh, I see. That's so much more vivid than just I take pictures after work.
Right. And notice how the hobby fits right into the routine. It's not just something you do, it's part of how you experience your day.
Hmm. This is making me think about how hobbies can actually shape our routines too. Like some people wake up early to run before work because they're all about fitness, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes it's the other way around. Maybe your
Yeah.
job is so busy, you got to get creative with your hobbies. Instead of a long painting session, you squeeze in little sketches at lunch.
That's a good point. It's all about making it work. And it's interesting how this would even come up in a chat, right? Like someone might ask, how do you fit hobbies in with your schedule? And boom, you can talk about those creative solutions.
Exactly. It shows you're not just passionate, but you can adapt,
Hmm.
like showing you really get to the language.
Okay, so we've talked about spicing up our language, weaving in those hobbies, even finding ways to fit them in. But there's one more thing, right? Expressing those likes and abilities, but confidently. I trip up on phrases like, I enjoy,
Hmm.
or I'm good at. They feel awkward.
I get it. It can feel a bit vulnerable to share that stuff, especially in another language. But remember, it's about showing who you are, connecting with people who get you.
So how do I make those phrases sound more natural, less like I'm showing off?
Well, first, it's okay to be enthusiastic. Let your passion show. Instead of just, I enjoy playing guitar, you could say, I absolutely love losing myself in the music when I play. It's how I de-stress.
Oh, I like that. Adding how you feel makes it sound more genuine.
Right. And don't be afraid to mix it up instead of always, I enjoy.
Yeah.
You could say, I'm really into, or I'm passionate about.
Those are good. More personality for sure. What about when I want to talk about what I'm good at? I hesitate to say I'm good at. Sounds a bit like bragging.
I know what you mean, but sharing what you're good at isn't bragging. It's about, maybe finding things in common with someone instead of, I'm good at baking. I've been experimenting with baking and, I'm actually getting pretty decent at it.
That does sound more approachable.
Right. Or you could say, I'm no master chef, but I can whip up a pretty mean chocolate cake. A little humor always helps too. If you're unsure, just add something like, I'm still learning, but having a blast.
Love that. Humor definitely makes things more comfortable. This has been so helpful. I feel like I'm going from basic tools to a whole workshop, but I'm still curious about that final example, the one that combined routine and hobbies in one sentence. What was it again?
Oh, yeah. It was, after work, I usually go jogging in the park. Then I spend some time reading a book before dinner. On weekends, I like to go hiking with my friends. It seems simple, right? But it's actually pretty effective.
All right, let's hear it. What makes it so special? Okay, I'm all ears. Break this example down for me.
All right, so first, notice how it starts with a time frame, right? After work. It puts us right in a routine, everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
But then instead of just listing tasks, it says jogging in the park.
Yeah, that makes it more personal, like I can picture it.
Right. It's not just any jogging, it's their park.
Hmm.
And then it goes to a different hobby, reading, but it's still part of the routine. Then I spend some time reading before dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So you see how they fit it all in.
And it ends with the weekend. On weekends, I like to go hiking with my friends. So we see their social life too, right?
Exactly. One sentence, and we get a whole picture. Their routines, hobbies, their friends. even what they value, fitness, relaxing, good company.
Wow, I never thought one sentence could say so much. So, how do I do this with my life? Talking about my stuff in English.
It's about finding those connections in your own life. What makes your routine and hobbies special? Where do you go? Who's with you? How do you feel?
Hmm. So, instead of I like to cook, I could say, after a long day, I love trying new recipes in my tiny kitchen, filling the place with the smell of spices.
It's perfect. You took a simple thing and made it an experience. Now I can almost smell it too.
This has been amazing. I feel like I've leveled up big time.
That's great to hear. Just keep practicing. Don't be afraid to try things out. Let your personality out. Have fun with it.
You've given me a lot to think about. Thanks for sharing all this with us.
Happy to help and happy learning, everyone.
And that's it for this deep dive. We hope you enjoyed exploring routines and hobbies in English with us. Remember, it's not just words, it's the stories you tell and the connections you make. Until next time, keep diving deep.